You don't always notice the exact second your title gets stripped. Sometimes, it's just one sentence that guts you in front of everyone you love. The roast was dry, the laughter loud, and I'd already counted 3 times Jenna had corrected Toby's grammar mid-sentence. But when my grandson reached across the mashed potatoes and said, "Dad, can I?" Jenna didn't even blink. "He's not your dad, sweetheart. Call him by his name. It's Grandpa or Richard, but not Dad." A silence dropped like a cleaver. Toby looked down at his plate. Lucas didn't even flinch. I glanced at him, searching for his eyes for even a twitch of discomfort, for the son I raised with calloused hands and bedtime stories. But he was buttering a roll. My hand froze around the glass. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, I think I left the porch light on." Jenna didn't look up. Lucas didn't stop chewing. Only Toby peeked over, eyes wide and confused. The porch light was off, so I stood there, hands in my pockets, pretending to fix a bulb that wasn't broken. My chest thudded, not with rage, but with that dull, familiar ache that comes when you're quietly erased. I heard the clatter of forks inside, the cadence of voices picking back up, and then her laugh. Jenna's sharp, performative laugh. I used to dream about family dinners like this. The table full, generations close, memories layered over dishes we used every Thanksgiving. My wife would have never let a moment like that go unaddressed. But she was gone. And so was the man I used to be, apparently. Later that night back home, I poured a small scotch and sat in the dark. No TV, no music, just the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of that sentence. "He's not your dad." She said it like she was stating a fact, like she was drawing a line through my title, my presence, my fatherhood. Lucas didn't blink. He let her. He let her. I stood, walked to the study, and opened the old roll-top desk. Bottom right drawer, still labeled in my wife's handwriting. Final will and directives. I ran my fingers over the ink like it might come alive again. Inside were the files, the documents we'd worked on for years, the original will, the handwritten addendums, the trust paperwork. My wife had insisted everything be thorough, protective. Her voice came back to me like a soft echo. "Don't trust charm over paper, and don't assume your silence will earn their respect." She knew this might come. Maybe I did too. I flipped through the pages. Jenna's name wasn't in them, not once, and it wasn't an accident. My wife and I had agreed, no inheritance to in-laws until trust was proven, not assumed. Our son would inherit what we built, but Jenna, no. I had let that folder collect dust, thinking the threat had passed. I sipped the last of the scotch and placed the folder on the desk. Not hidden, not buried, in plain view now, a reminder. Inner voice. If someone's listening, don't let silence swallow your story. Don't wait until the chair at the table disappears beneath you. Speak when it's hardest. I looked over at the photo on the wall. My wife, holding Lucas as a baby, both of them grinning like the world couldn't touch them. And for a time it couldn't. Until now. I stared at the man in the frame. Back then I was Dad. Tonight I was Richard. Tomorrow I'd start remembering who I really was. And they'd remember too. Sometimes the answers aren't buried in the ground. They're sitting in plain sight, waiting for you to be desperate enough to open the drawer. The next morning, I brewed coffee stronger than usual and sat at the desk again. The folder was still there, where I'd left it the night before. My wife's handwriting, neat and steady, stared back at me from the label, Final Will and Directives. I pulled it open. The paper inside had the faint yellowing of time, but every line was clear. I could almost hear her voice narrating it as I read. Lucas and I listed as co-trustees. Not Jenna. Not a single mention of her name, not even in the fine print. My throat tightened. I whispered, "You were right, Ellen, you always were." The conditions were written with her typical foresight. Lucas would inherit when he was ready, when he could stand on his own 2 feet without anyone else pulling his strings. The clauses were strict, deliberate. If undue influence is suspected, the trust may be frozen pending review. At the time, I'd thought she was being cautious to a fault. I remembered laughing, even teasing her gently. "Lucas isn't the type to be manipulated," I said. She hadn't laughed. She just looked at me serious, almost sad. "Not by himself, maybe, but watch who he lets into his ear." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Jenna had slipped into our lives after Ellen's funeral, when the house was full of casseroles and pity but empty of the one voice that kept us steady. She was sympathetic at first, attentive even. She smiled at me like I was fragile. She clung to Lucas like she was the rope keeping him from falling. And I had let it happen. Grief does that. It dulls your instincts, makes you see kindness where there might be calculation. Now the edges were sharp again. I thumbed through the rest of the file. There were letters Ellen had insisted we draft together, notes to be attached in case of dispute. Her words were firm. Inheritance is a responsibility, not a prize. Should Lucas fail to uphold this, the assets are to be placed under protective trust until such time that he does. No mention of spouses, no room for loopholes. She had been precise. I pressed the pages flat with my hand. "God, Ellen," I whispered, "you must have known this day would come." My phone buzzed on the desk. A notification, nothing important. Still, it jolted me. I wasn't used to the quiet being broken anymore. I poured the last of the coffee, bitter and lukewarm, then pulled my contacts list open. Helen Carter. It had been years since I'd spoken her name out loud. She had been there through every contract, every deed, every amendment my wife pushed for. Back then, she was sharp, relentless. I hadn't called her since Ellen's funeral. I couldn't face the pity in her eyes. But tonight I would. I picked up the phone. The dial tone felt longer than it should have. "Richard," her voice steady, professional, with just enough warmth to cut through the static. "Yeah, it's been a while." "It has." A pause. "Why now?" I exhaled, slow. "Because my daughter-in-law decided last night to remind me I'm not family." Silence, then a low, knowing sound. "Ah. I need to revisit the will, the original, Ellen's version." "You still have it?" "Right here in front of me." "And Jenna?" "She's not in it, not even a whisper." Helen chuckled, humorless. "Of course she is. Ellen didn't like her much, if you remember." "I remember. I just didn't want to believe it mattered." "Belief doesn't change paper, Richard. Paper is what stands up in court." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "So what do we do?" "We don't do anything yet. You bring me that file, I'll make copies, and then we wait. People like Jenna, they can't help but show their hand." When we hung up, I sat in the quiet again. The folder in front of me, the old will steady under my palm. I wasn't shaking anymore. I felt steady too. Final beat. That night I didn't drink to forget. I drank to remember. Because the drawer hadn't just given me paper, it had given me a reason to fight back. Some people forget details with time. But a good lawyer never forgets the words she put to paper, especially when those words were written to protect you. Helen's office smelled the same as it had 10 years ago: paper, ink, and faint lavender from the diffuser she always kept by the window. I paused in the doorway, clutching the worn folder under my arm, like it was both shield and evidence. She looked up from her desk and her face softened. "Richard." "Helen," my voice cracked more than I wanted. 10 years, she said, but it feels like yesterday. I nodded, stepping inside. Yesterday was easier. Her eyes flicked to the folder. "You brought it." I sat, laid it down between us, right where Ellen left it. She pulled her glasses lower, opening the file with a kind of reverence. Her fingers traced the margins like she was reading a familiar hymn. "Do you remember drafting this?" I asked. Her lips curved just slightly. Every line. Ellen was thorough, more thorough than most clients, to be honest. She wanted protections, clauses people don't think to include until it's too late. She always thought ahead. Helen nodded. She insisted we add a clause about undue influence. If Lucas was ever coerced, manipulated, or acted against his own best interest, the inheritance could be frozen, temporarily, until a review could confirm his judgment was his own. My stomach twisted. I rubbed at the side of my hand like I was trying to erase the words I just heard. "And you think—" "I don't think," Helen interrupted. "I suspect. From the way you sounded on the phone, from what you've told me about Jenna, these aren't just social slights, Richard. They're pressure points." I leaned forward. She corrected my grandson at the dinner table, told him not to call me Dad, right in front of Lucas. Helen's eyes hardened, and Lucas said nothing. Nothing, just silence. She shut the file, sitting back. "That's not silence, Richard, that's compliance." Her words hit harder than I expected. I stared at the bookshelves behind her, packed tight with volumes on estates, trusts, probate. The kind of fortress my wife had wanted around me. "Ellen always said," I muttered half to myself, "don't assume silence means respect. Sometimes it's just cowardice." Helen tilted her head. She was right, she usually was. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. I used to think Jenna was helping him, that after Ellen passed, Lucas needed someone strong, someone to carry the weight I couldn't. And now I think she saw the cracks and filled them with her own kind of cement. Helen tapped the folder. "Here, what we're going to do, nothing." I blinked. "Nothing." "Not yet. You don't update the will, you don't confront her. You let them think they're winning, because people like Jenna, they can't hide ambition. They'll push too far, and when they do, this document is your shield." I let the silence stretch. Her certainty was a strange comfort, but fear gnawed at the edges. What if I'm too late? Helen leaned forward, eyes locking onto mine. "You're not too late. You're sitting here, with the original will, with the protections Ellen insisted on. You are exactly on time." I exhaled, a long, shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So we wait." "We wait," she said firmly. "And we watch. Call me if they bring papers. Call me if they bring notaries. Call me if Lucas shows up nervous or Jenna shows up sweet. Don't sign anything. Don't explain anything. Let them reveal themselves." For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest lift of something I hadn't felt since Ellen died. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was steadiness. I gathered the folder, standing. "Thank you, Helen." She gave me a look steady as stone. "Richard, you're not alone, don't forget that." The late afternoon light was sharp when I stepped outside, bouncing off the glass doors. I clutched the folder to my chest, the weight of it grounding me. Final beat. I came in with nothing but paper. I walked out with a plan. And for the first time since Jenna said those words, I didn't feel erased, I felt ready. Betrayal rarely announces itself in thunder. Sometimes it slips quietly into your inbox, wrapped in casual words not meant for your eyes. It was late afternoon when the ping came, a new email notification. The sender's name caught me off guard, Jenna. I frowned. She'd never written me directly before. Clicking it open, I realized it wasn't written to me at all. The subject line, "This is getting ridiculous." The body. Taking care of someone else's dad like he's our responsibility. Lucas better convince him to sign the new paperwork, or this whole estate thing is going to drag forever. I didn't marry into bills. I married into stability. You know what I mean. At the bottom, sent from my iPhone. And beneath that, a line of forwarding headers. She meant to send it to a friend. Instead, it landed in my lap. My hand trembled over the mouse. I reread it 3 times, slower each time, until the words weren't just letters, they were cuts. someone else's dad. That was me, reduced to an obligation, a burden, an inconvenience to be signed away with a stroke of a pen. I leaned back in my chair, the old wood groaning under the weight of me and the truth pressing in. I thought of Ellen again, how she used to say, "People tell you who they are when they think you're not listening." Well, Jenna had just told me, and I was listening. The phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Dad, let's talk soon about some papers, nothing serious." I set the phone down without replying. My chest tightened, like a rope was being drawn slowly around it. He was part of this. Whether through silence or consent, he was in it. I hit forward, typed Helen's email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the subject line I wrote, "Accident." In the body just one line, "Read and advise." Then I hit send. A few minutes later my phone buzzed again, this time Helen. Her reply was short, deliberate. "Do not respond, do not confront, save everything, now we wait." I sat back, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the old clock in the corner filled the silence. Wait, that was always the hardest part. I poured myself a small drink, though it tasted bitter tonight. Lucas as a boy came back to me, the way he used to sit at the kitchen table, chewing his pencil, waiting for me to check his math homework. Did I get it right? "Dad," he'd ask. And I'd smile, "Not yet, but you're close, keep trying." Now he wanted me to sign papers instead of math homework, and Jenna wanted me out of the equation altogether. The boy who used to need my approval now needed my compliance. I turned back to the email, still open on the screen. The casual cruelty of it was what struck me most. No hesitation, no shame, just entitlement, like I was a line item on her expense sheet. And Lucas, better convince him. The rope tightened again. Inner thought. Convince me. As if fatherhood is a negotiation. As if my home, my legacy, my dignity were things to be bartered over dinner. I printed the email, slid it into the folder with the will. Paper against paper, truth against lies. The folder was heavier now, or maybe I was just feeling the weight of reality. Night fell slow. Outside, porch lights blinked on across the neighborhood. Families sat down to dinners, laughter spilling out of windows. I sat in my study, alone with the glow of the screen. But I wasn't as alone as I had been. Not with Helen's words in my pocket. Not with Ellen's foresight still inked on paper. The phone buzzed one more time. Helen again. This time just 2 words, "Be patient." I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and let the room fall into darkness. Final beat. Patience isn't weakness, it's a weapon, and tonight I'd learned how sharp silence could be. The enemy never knocks like a thief in the night. Sometimes they walk through the front door smiling, carrying the very knife they want you to hold against yourself. It was barely 9 when the doorbell rang. I was still in my robe, the smell of coffee clinging to the kitchen. When I opened the door, Lucas stood there with a tight smile, Jenna behind him carrying a slim leather folder. "Morning, Dad," Lucas said. His voice had that rehearsed cheerfulness I hadn't heard since he was a teenager trying to hide a bad grade. Jenna stepped forward, lips curved. "We thought we'd swing by. Got something simple for you to sign just to make sure things run smoother. You know, estate stuff." Estate stuff. My jaw clenched, but I stepped aside, motioning them in. We sat at the dining table. Jenna laid the folder flat like it was a sacred offering. The papers gleamed crisp and white under the morning sun. Lucas adjusted his cuffs nervously. "It's nothing major, Dad, just updates, legal housekeeping." I leaned back, feigning casual. "Housekeeping, huh?" Jenna slid the first page toward me. "Power of attorney, just a formality. It'll make things easier for Lucas to handle day-to-day matters, you know, bills, accounts." I cut her off softly. "I already handle my bills." Her smile stiffened. "Of course, but this way if something happens." Her eyes lingered on me a second too long. I reached for the paper, squinting. "Need my glasses," I muttered. Truth was, I could read it just fine. The text blurred only because rage was buzzing in my skull. Words leapt out. Transfer of authority, liquidation of trust, ASSETS, primary beneficiary, LUCAS, and spouse. Spouse, that was Jenna's real signature on this ambush. I slid the paper closer, pretending to struggle. These words so small. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Jenna leaned forward. "I can explain every line." "I bet you can," I muttered under my breath. Lucas cleared his throat. "Dad, it's really just easier this way. Less confusion. You trust me, right?" Trust, the word nearly broke me in half. I looked at him, searching for the boy who used to slip his hand into mine when crossing the street. Instead, I saw a man too weak to cross it without his wife leading him. I forced a smile. "Of course I trust you, son. I'm old. I get tired. Let me sleep on it. Tomorrow morning, maybe." Jenna's lips pressed thin. "There's no rush," she said, but her tone betrayed urgency. "No rush at all," I repeated, folding the papers slowly and sliding them back into the folder. They stayed a few minutes longer, sipping coffee awkwardly while I made small talk about the weather, the neighbors, anything but the ticking bomb they'd set on my table. Jenna tried to circle back once. "If you're comfortable signing now." I shook my head. One thing I've learned at this age: never rush paperwork, not even with family. Her jaw tightened, but she disguised it with a laugh. "You're cautious, that's good." When they finally left, I stood at the window, watching their car pull away. Jenna's hand waved theatrically at me through the glass, but her eyes stayed cold. That evening, under the steady light of my desk lamp, I fed every page through my old scanner. Each beep of the machine felt like a hammer striking nails into their coffin. When the last page was saved, I attached them in an email to Helen. My message was short. "They brought this today. Advice." It took her less than 5 minutes to respond. Her words were sharp, cutting through the quiet of my study. "That's attempted fraud." I sat back, staring at the screen. Attempted fraud. Not suspicion, not paranoia, a fact, a crime. The folder of Ellen's will sat on the corner of my desk. Beside it now, a new folder. Their fraud, their ambition, their signatures. Two sides of the same war. Final beat. They thought age made me weak, that love made me blind. But paper doesn't lie. And today, the paper told me exactly what they were willing to steal. It's one thing to lose your place at the table. It's another to watch strangers measure the walls you built with your bare hands. It was a bright afternoon, sunlight flooding the living room when I caught the movement outside. At first, I thought it was just neighbors walking their dog, but the voices were too close, right outside the porch. I moved toward the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. There she was, Jenna, striding across my lawn like she owned it, hair catching the light, voice pitched high with saleswoman charm. And beside her, a man in a tailored jacket, clipboard in hand, pausing to glance at the siding, the flower beds, the porch railing Ellen and I painted together 20 years ago. My stomach knotted. I stepped closer to the glass. Jenna pointed toward the backyard, describing something animatedly. The man scribbled notes, nodded. She didn't see me. I opened the front door slowly, the hinges groaning. Her head snapped up. For the briefest flicker, surprise crossed her face before she slipped back into a smile. "Richard," she said brightly, "didn't think you were home." I looked at the man beside her. "And who's this?" Jenna waved a hand, too casual. "Oh, just a friend from my yoga class. We were talking about renovations and I thought I'd show him the layout. You know, inspiration." The man gave a polite nod, but the clip on his belt betrayed her lie. Clear as day, a realtor's badge dangling with the name Carl Benson, licensed agent. My eyes lingered on it, then back to Jenna. "Yoga class," I said flatly. She laughed, brittle around the edges. Well, more of a networking friend. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch heavy. The realtor shifted awkwardly, cleared his throat. Maybe I should. Yes, Carl, thank you, Jenna said quickly, ushering him toward the driveway. We'll be in touch. He left without shaking my hand. When the car pulled away, Jenna turned back to me, eyes narrowing. You shouldn't sneak up on people like that, Richard. It's unsettling. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. It's my porch, my lawn, my house. She tilted her chin, unfazed. For now. I didn't rise to it, didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I lifted my phone and snapped a single photo of her standing there, sun behind her, caught mid-glare. Her smile twitched back into place. You're paranoid, Richard. This is exactly why we're trying to make things simpler for you. I slid the phone back into my pocket, sure. And I stepped inside, closing the door without another word. The quiet of the house felt different now, violated. Every wall seemed to hum with the echo of her footsteps, her voice describing my rooms to someone else. I walked slowly through the hall, touching the door frames as I passed. The pencil marks where Lucas's height had been charted as a boy were still faintly visible in the kitchen doorway. Ellen's handwriting marked the dates: age 7, age 9, age 12. And Jenna wanted it gone. That night, under the glow of the desk lamp, I opened the folder again. Inside, the will, the fraudulent documents, and now one more piece, the photo of Jenna with her yoga friend. I printed it, slid it carefully into a plastic sleeve, and added it to the stack. Evidence, piece by piece, their ambition was building my case. My phone buzzed. A message from Helen. Everything you collect matters. Don't underestimate small details. I typed back one line. Got another today. I sat back in my chair, staring at the growing folder. My life's history on one side, their fraud on the other. Final beat. They thought showing the house without me would make me invisible, but every step they took left footprints, and I was following them, one by one. Children don't lie in crayon. Their drawings reveal the truths adults are too proud to admit out loud. Toby bounded up the steps with his usual clumsy enthusiasm, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Lucas had dropped him off for an afternoon, saying Jenna had errands. It wasn't unusual, but the way Toby clutched the paper in his hands was different. "Grandpa," he called, running straight into the kitchen. "I made you something at school." I crouched down, smiling despite myself. "Oh yeah, let's see." He unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing the creases with his small fingers. It was a house, my house, drawn with bold, uneven lines, bright blue sky overhead, flowers too tall for the porch railing. And there were people, two stick figures inside the house, smiling, one with short brown hair, one with long yellow strands. Lucas and Jenna, clear as day. And off to the side, outside the house, a smaller figure, bald head, gray shirt, waving. Me. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "That's beautiful, Toby. You worked hard on this." He grinned proudly. "Yep." I tapped the little waving figure. "And why, Grandpa, outside?" Toby tilted his head, thinking. "'Cause Mom says we're moving soon. You're gonna stay behind." The words came out so casually, so innocently. My blood turned cold. I looked at him, his big eyes so certain, unclouded by malice. He wasn't lying. He was repeating. Repeating what they'd told him. I sat back on my heels, the edges of the drawing cutting into my fingers. "They told you that, huh?" He nodded. "Mom said this house is gonna be ours, and you'll have your own place like the little ones with elevators, for old people." I managed to keep my voice calm. "A condo." "Yeah, that's the word." His smile dimmed a little when he saw my face. "You do like it." I forced my lips into a curve. It's a change, buddy, but changes aren't always bad." Inside, my stomach was twisting. They weren't just stealing the house. They were rewriting me out of Toby's world. I set the paper on the table and pulled him onto my lap. "Toby, you know Grandpa loves you, right?" He nodded, "Lots and lots." "Good, and you know this house is special. This is where your dad grew up, where your grandma lived, where you've played since you were little." He wriggled, bored already, but I held on gently. "Don't forget that, okay?" He looked at me with that blunt honesty only children have. "Grandma's house." "Exactly." I kissed the top of his head. Later, when Lucas came to pick him up, I tucked the drawing into my folder before Jenna could see it. Lucas stood at the door, impatient as always. "Good day?" he asked flatly. "Always," I said. Toby waved from the car window. "Bye, Grandpa." I waved back, holding the drawing close under my arm. That night I sat at my desk, staring at the paper under the lamplight. The crayon colors glowed innocent, cheerful, but all I could see was the outline of myself, exiled to the lawn. Inner thought. They were teaching him that I didn't belong, conditioning him to see me as temporary, a placeholder, a ghost already fatting from the picture. I slipped the drawing into a sleeve, added it to the growing stack in the folder. Fraudulent signatures, realtors' badges, emails not meant for me, and now, a child's crayon truth. This was more than property. This was blood. This was memory. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Ellen's voice seemed to echo faintly in the room. "Don't let them erase you." I closed my eyes. "I won't." Final beat. They can tamper with deeds, forge signatures, even parade strangers through my home. But when they use my grandson to erase me, they make one mistake too many. Toby isn't my weakness. He's my reason. The worst betrayal isn't when strangers forge your name. It's when the hand holding the pen belongs to your own family. The phone rang just after dusk. I almost let it go to voicemail, but Helen's name lit the screen. I answered, "Helen." Her voice was steady, but I caught the edge beneath it. "Richard, I need you to listen carefully." I straightened in my chair, folder spread open before me. "I'm listening." "They filed paperwork this morning. Registry of Deeds, your property, and on it your signature." My chest tightened. "Yes," she cut in. "Your signature, only it's not. It's clumsy, Richard. A forgery. Anyone who's seen your real signature would know. But in black ink on official paper, it looks convincing enough to push through." I gripped the arm of my chair. "That's a felony." "I know," her calm faltered. "Which is why I need you to do nothing. Don't confront them, don't tip your hand. We'll catch them in the act clean, no questions. Understand?" The silence between us hung heavy. Finally I asked, "How?" Helen exhaled. "Do you still have that security camera Ellen insisted on years ago, the one by the study?" I turned my head toward the corner of the room. The small device, long unplugged, sat gathering dust. "I do." "Then activate it, tonight. Place it where it catches everything, papers, pens, faces. If they come again, we'll have what we need, not just suspicion. Proof." I stared at the little black eye of the camera. Ellen's voice drifted back from a decade ago, teasing me as she unpacked it from the box. "You're stubborn, Richard. One day you'll thank me for being cautious." I'd argued at the time, said cameras were for people who didn't trust their families. She just smiled sadly. "Richard," Helen pressed, "can you do this?" I swallowed. "I can." "Good, forward me a copy of that email again. The one Jenna sent by mistake. It ties nicely with this forgery. Together they show intent." I shuffled through the folder, sliding the printed email back into the stack. "You think they'll try again?" Her voice lowered. "People like Jenna, greed doesn't slow down, it accelerates. They won't stop until they think you're powerless. Let them try. This time we'll be ready." After I hung up, the house was too quiet. I sat in the study, staring at Ellen's photograph on the desk. Her smile was soft, eyes filled with the kind of faith that used to make me feel invincible. "I should have listened sooner," I muttered. The camera was still in its box, tucked on the top shelf of the closet. I pulled it down, brushed off the dust, and plugged it in. The tiny red light blinked to life, steady and watchful. I positioned it carefully, angled toward the desk where Jenna had once tried to get me to sign their so-called updates. Inner thought: if they came back, the pen in their hand would be more dangerous than any weapon. But now the house would be watching too. I sat back, testing the angle on the small monitor. Every inch of the desk was visible. Every line of paper would be caught. I closed the curtains tight, leaving only the glow of the desk lamp. Then I locked the folder in the drawer, not to hide it from them, but to bait them. Because Helen was right, greed accelerates. The house groaned around me as the night deepened. I poured a small scotch, the amber liquid trembling in my hand. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, then fell silent. The only sound left was the steady hum of the activated camera. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was sitting alone in the dark. I felt like Ellen was there, her foresight still protecting me. Final beat. They thought they'd forged my name, but I was about to sign something of my own, their downfall, written in pixels and time stamps. Trust is given in keys. Betrayal is revealed when those keys turn in locks long after dark. It was close to midnight when the sound came, faint, metallic. The front door easing open, careful like a thief. I stayed still in my chair, lights off, the hum of the security camera steady above the desk. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loud. The floor creaked. A shadow passed down the hall. Lucas. He carried himself the way he did as a boy, sneaking in past curfew, head lowered, shoulders tense, but moving with purpose. Only this wasn't a boy anymore. This was a man with his hand in my pocket. He went straight to the study. My study, the one place Ellen always said was sacred. I watched from the reflection in the window as he pulled open the desk drawer. Papers shuffled. He rifled through the files, one after another, moving faster, his jaw clenched. The folder wasn't there. I'd locked it away hours earlier. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, thumbs flying across the screen. The camera caught the glow of the text message, his lips moving faintly as he read it aloud. Can't find it. He waited. The phone buzzed a minute later. His face lit up, annoyed. He muttered, "Fine, I'll check again tomorrow." He shoved the drawer closed, too hard this time. The slam echoed in the quiet house. Then, like nothing had happened, he tucked the phone away and slipped out. The front door clicked shut behind him. I didn't move until the silence swallowed everything again. Then I leaned back slowly, staring at the blinking red light of the camera. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something colder. Evidence. The next morning, I uploaded the footage to my computer, watching every second carefully. Lucas's face, the drawer, the text, the slam, all of it clear as glass. I saved the file 3 times, labeled it insurance. Then I called Helen. She answered on the first ring. "Richard." "I've got something," I said. "What kind of something?" "The kind you warned me about." I emailed the file while we stayed on the phone. A few seconds later, she was watching it. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "My God," she whispered. Then a pause and laughter, low, bitter laughter. "He handed it to us." I stayed quiet, the weight of it still pressing on my chest. Helen's voice hardened. "This isn't just suspicion anymore. It's breaking and entering, intent to steal, attempted fraud, all caught on camera." The line went silent again, and then she said, "Richard, we're almost there." "Almost?" Yes, I could hear the steel in her tone now. "Now we set the trap." I stared at Ellen's picture on the desk, her smile frozen in time. I wondered what she would say if she knew her son had crept into her study like a burglar. I whispered to the photograph, "I'm sorry, I didn't raise him to be this." Inner thought. But blood doesn't erase choice, and choice is what he made tonight. Helen's voice cut through my thoughts. I'll draft the bait documents. We'll leave them where he can't resist, and when he takes the hook, we'll have him by the throat." I exhaled slowly, and Jenna, she'll be in it up to her neck. Don't worry, Richard. Greed makes people sloppy. All we have to do is keep the line steady. After the call, I poured myself a drink, but I didn't touch it. My hands rested flat on the desk, the wood scarred with decades of life. The house was quiet again, but not empty. It felt alive, vigilant, watching like I was. I turned off the monitor, the footage safely stored, and let the silence settle deep. Final beat. They thought the house was theirs, but tonight the house watched back, and now it held their confession. A liar's smile is just a mask, but if you keep talking long enough, the mask always slips. Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Jenna stood there, bright as a summer ad, holding a tray of lattes. Beside her, a man in a pressed shirt clutched a leather briefcase. "Richard," Jenna chirped, "we thought we'd surprise you, brought your favorite vanilla latte, right?" Her smile was too wide, her tone too cheerful. That always meant trouble. "And this," she gestured to the man, "is David. He's a notary, just a tiny form for taxes. Routine, nothing scary. We figured we'd make it easy and come to you." My gut twisted. A notary at my front door, with Jenna smiling like a snake. I let them in, slow and measured. "Taxes, huh?" I asked, taking the coffee. It tasted burnt, but I sipped anyway, keeping my face neutral. The man, David, sat stiff at the table. He opened his briefcase and slid a form across. "Just a confirmation of property information. Helps with assessment filings." I glanced down. The words swam, deliberate legalese. But in the fine print I spotted it. Authorization to transfer tucked neatly among the paragraphs. I looked up. That's a lot of language for taxes. David cleared his throat. "Standard stuff, sir. Nothing to worry about." I leaned back in my chair. "So you're a notary, David. Where's your license?" The room stilled. Jenna jumped in. "Oh, he doesn't need to." "I'd like to see it," I said, my voice even. David hesitated, then pulled a card from his pocket. I held it, flipping it between my fingers. The seal looked real enough, but the edges were poorly laminated. The expiration date was smeared. I raised an eyebrow. "Odd. My wife always said notaries love to flash their stamp. Yours seems shy." David forced a laugh, but his eyes flicked toward Jenna. I stood. "Excuse me a moment. Nature calls." I carried the coffee mug with me, strolling out the back door instead of to the restroom. Their voices muffled behind me, hurried and hushed. Outside, I pulled out my phone and circled to the street. David's car sat at the curb, still idling. A black sedan, spotless. I crouched, snapping a clear photo of the license plate. Back inside, Jenna looked up quickly, too quickly. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, sliding back into my chair. "Just wanted to stretch." David pushed the paper closer. "If you just sign here." I smiled faintly. "You know, I've learned something in my old age. Never sign when you're rushed. Give me the night. I'll review it, then call you tomorrow." Jenna's smile tightened. "It's really best to finish it now, Richard." "Tomorrow," I repeated, folding the paper and handing it back. My voice left no room for debate. David looked relieved to pack up his case. Jenna stood, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. "Well, we tried to make this easy for you." "Appreciate the coffee," I said, walking them out. The moment their car rolled away, I texted Helen. Sent her the plate photo, the fake notary's card, and a quick note. They came again. Brought their own witness this time. She called within minutes. "Richard, do not sign a single scrap they hand you. That man isn't a licensed notary in this state. I checked. The name he gave doesn't match the plates on that sedan." I listened to the edge of fury in her voice. "That's attempted fraud on top of forgery," she continued. "They're stacking charges without realizing it. Good. Let them keep digging." I sat back in my chair after the call, staring at the dent Ellen's mug had left in the wooden table over years of morning coffee. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something heavier: resolve. Final beat. They thought I'd sign my life away between sips of coffee. But paper isn't just ink, and I'm not just an old man. I was watching, and now so was the law. Sometimes the sharpest knives aren't in the kitchen. They're in the words we choose to serve at the table. I hadn't cooked a full dinner in years, not since Ellen's last birthday. But tonight, I laid out the old oak table, polished the silver, and poured wine into the glasses she once loved. "Feels like old times, huh?" I said as Lucas, Jenna, and Toby filed in. Jenna sniffed at the roast, already taking control of the room. "You didn't have to go through the trouble, Richard." I smiled. I wanted to. The conversation started light. Jenna dominated, as she always did, stories about her yoga friends, her plans for the future, little barbs disguised as humor. Lucas nodded, silent. Toby squirmed in his chair, bored. And me, I listened, patient. Halfway through dinner, Toby tugged at my sleeve. "Thanks for dinner, Dad," he whispered softly, the way he'd always called me. The word hung in the air like thunder. Jenna's fork froze midair. Her eyes snapped toward him. "Toby," she said sharply, "how many times do I have to tell you? He's not your dad. Call him by his name." The table went silent. Lucas lowered his head, pretending to cut his steak. Toby shrank back, cheeks flushing. "Sorry, Mom." I looked at Jenna, but this time the humiliation didn't burn. Instead, something colder settled in me. "You're right," I said evenly, setting down my glass. "He shouldn't call me that." Jenna smirked, satisfied. I leaned forward, my smile calm. "From now on, let's all stick to legal titles, just to keep things clear." Her smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached under the table, slid out a folder, and placed it on the wood. The weight of it hit like a stone. "Legal titles," I repeated. "Co-trustee, beneficiary, executor. Words that matter when signatures are forged and names are erased." Jenna's face drained of color. Lucas's fork clattered against his plate. I opened the folder slowly, pulling out the original will. The one Ellen and I had signed years ago, notarized and witnessed properly. I laid it flat in the center of the table. The lamp above caught the embossed seal. "This," I said softly, "is Ellen's final will and directive. Helen drafted it herself. It names Lucas and me as co-trustees. It sets conditions for inheritance. And you, Jenna," I tapped the page with my finger, "you're not in this one." For a long moment, no one moved. Toby looked confused, glancing between us. Lucas's throat worked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Finally, Jenna laughed, too loud, brittle. "This is ridiculous. Old paperwork, meaningless. Lucas and I already—" "Already what?" I interrupted. "Already forged new documents. Already brought fake notaries into my home. Already broken into my study like thieves in the night." Her laugh died. Lucas's face went red. "Dad." I raised my hand. "No, tonight. Not about shouting. Tonight's about truth. The truth is this house, this trust, this family history. It doesn't belong to you, Jenna. It never has, and it never will." Toby whispered, "Grandpa." His small hand tugged at my sleeve again. I looked at him and managed a smile. "Don't worry, Toby. Some things can't be taken away. No matter how hard people try." Jenna's chair scraped back sharply. "We're leaving," she spat. Lucas rose too, though slower, his eyes flicking to the will on the table. "Take the roast with you," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I made enough for everyone." They stormed out, Toby trailing reluctantly, still clutching his napkin. The slam of the door echoed down the hall. I poured myself another glass of wine, the will still open in front of me. Final beat. They thought they could erase me with ink. Tonight, I reminded them, paper cuts both ways. Some truths belong in private. Others demand an audience. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, the way all small-town community centers do. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows, every one of them filled neighbors, old friends from the Veterans Club, even the pastor. They thought they were here for some dry legal proceeding. I knew better. Helen stood at the front with the folder in her hands, calm and sharp as ever. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. This is a reading of Richard and Ellen's final directives, including the recently amended clauses. Mr. Thompson has requested witnesses beyond the family. Transparency is everything here. The murmur ran through the crowd. Jenna shifted uncomfortably beside Lucas, her eyes darting around. Lucas just stared at the floor. Helen began to read, her voice even. The estate of Richard Thompson, co-trustee with his late wife Ellen Thompson, is to be maintained for the benefit of his son, Lucas Thompson, under the following conditions. I watched Jenna's jaw tighten. She thought she knew what was coming. And further, Helen continued, a trust is hereby established for the minor child, Toby Thompson. Said trust is contingent upon one non-negotiable clause: Richard Thompson's continued role in the child's life as guardian and presence. Should access be obstructed, the trust is frozen. A ripple moved through the room. Neighbors turned, whispering. The veterans at the back sat straighter. Jenna shot to her feet. This is absurd. You can't put conditions like that in a will. Helen didn't even glance at her. Ma'am, I drafted the original documents myself. The conditions are entirely legal. This room is full of witnesses to that effect. Jenna flushed, her voice rising. This is manipulation. He's trying to control us. Lucas shifted, finally looking up. His face was pale, ashamed. Jenna, he murmured. She rounded on him. Say something. Tell them this isn't fair. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but carrying. Fair. The room went still. Fair is what Ellen wanted. She asked me to protect this family's home, this family's memory. Fair is making sure Toby knows where he comes from, who raised him, who built the walls around him. You want fairness, Jenna? Then answer me this. I paused, locking eyes with her. Why did your notary disappear when I asked for his license? Why does my camera show Lucas sneaking into my study at midnight? Gasps echoed. All eyes shifted to Lucas, who looked like a boy caught with his hand in the jar. Helen closed the folder deliberately. The community has heard the terms. They've seen the documents. The law will follow. But sometimes the law doesn't need to shout. The truth is heavy enough. Jenna sputtered. This isn't over. Lucas reached for her arm. She yanked it away. But in that moment, the room wasn't on her side. Neighbors I'd known for decades looked at me with nods of respect. The veterans clapped my shoulder as I passed. Even the pastor whispered, "Good man, Richard, good man." Toby sat near the front, coloring quietly in a notebook. When he looked up, he smiled. "Grandpa, did we win?" I crouched beside him, my voice catching. "We did more than win, buddy. We told the truth." The crowd dispersed slowly, conversations buzzing. Helen stayed by my side, calm but satisfied. "You didn't have to raise your voice once," she said quietly. "They did all the shouting for you." I nodded, my eyes on Jenna storming out, dragging Lucas behind her. Final beat. You don't always need to fight with fists or fury. Sometimes, you let the truth sit in the room long enough, and it does the work for you. Guilt doesn't knock with fists. It knocks with silence, and the sound of someone who finally ran out of excuses. The knock came just after dusk, slow, hesitant, not Jenna's brand of sharp rapping. When I opened the door, Lucas stood there, hands buried in his pockets, eyes bloodshot. Alone. "Dad," he said quietly, can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He moved past me, shoulders hunched like a boy caught sneaking cigarettes behind the garage. We sat at the kitchen table, the one Ellen and I bought second-hand 40 years ago. He stared at the wood grain as if it held all the answers. Finally, he spoke. She pushed everything, the papers, the trust, even the notary. It was all Jenna's idea. I folded my hands, letting the silence stretch until he squirmed. "And you?" I asked. His head dropped lower. "I went along. I thought it would keep the peace." I leaned forward, voice steady. "No, Lucas, you thought silence would make you innocent. It doesn't. Silence is just another kind of choice." He winced, shoulders trembling. I was weak. "I didn't soften, not yet. You were silent." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "I know. Every time she cut you off at dinner, every time she told Toby not to call you Dad, I should have stopped her. I didn't. I let her talk and I stayed quiet, and that's on me." The words hung between us, heavy and raw. I rose slowly, moving to the counter. I poured 2 cups of coffee, steam rising like old ghosts. I set one in front of him. "Then start fixing it," I said simply. He blinked, "Fixing it?" "For your son," I told him. "Not for me, not for Jenna, for Toby. He deserves to know his grandfather's not a criminal, not a tenant in his own house. He deserves to know truth doesn't have to hide." Lucas's lip trembled. He looked at me like he wanted permission to cry. I didn't give it, not with words, but I didn't look away either. Finally the tears came. He rubbed at his face, shaking his head. "I don't know if I can undo all of it." "You can start," I said. "How?" I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "Be present, speak up. When Jenna lies, don't stand beside her. When Toby asks questions, answer them honestly. And when the time comes, you testify. You tell the court what she did." His head snapped up. "Court?" "Yes," I said. "Helen's moving this forward. Forgery isn't just a family squabble, it's a crime. And you can either stand on the right side of it or let Toby watch you sink with her." He breathed hard, like the truth had knocked the air out of him. Then he nodded, slowly at first, then firmer. "You're right," he whispered. "I'll testify whatever you need." I studied him, searching for the boy I used to know, the one who built birdhouses in the backyard with me, who used to beg for one more inning of catch before sunset. For a flicker, I saw him again. But flickers weren't enough, not yet. He wiped his face, staring into the coffee. "I'm sorry, Dad." I let the words sit. Then I answered, my tone steady but not forgiving. "Don't tell me, show Toby, show yourself." He nodded again, biting his lip. We sat in silence, the clock ticking steady on the wall. When he finally rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. His eyes searched mine, almost begging for a hug, for a hand on the shoulder, for the absolution he wanted but hadn't earned. I didn't move. "Good night, Lucas," I said. He lowered his head and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Final beat. Blood makes us family, but choices decide if we stay that way. And tonight, Lucas had finally chosen to step out of the shadows, but forgiveness would take longer than one confession. When someone builds their throne on lies, all it takes is sunlight for the whole thing to collapse. It started with an envelope, no return address, delivered straight to Jenna's office at the financial firm where she strutted like she owned the floor. Inside, copies of the forged paperwork, the photo of her walking the realtor through my property, and the video of her notary fumbling when I asked for a license. All neat, all damning. I didn't send it myself. Helen handled the delivery, clean and careful, anonymous, just enough to make it look like the truth had grown legs of its own. By Tuesday, her license was under review. By Thursday, suspended. The firm wasted no time. They issued a public statement. "We take ethical conduct seriously. Effective immediately, Jenna Thompson is no longer affiliated with our services." Her desk cleared out in silence. Coworkers whispered as she left, heels clicking sharp on tile, eyes burning holes in the carpet. I watched the firm's website update later that night. Her photo vanished, her name scrubbed. It was like she'd never worked there at all. The realtor wasn't far behind. Word got back that he received a copy of the same package. One look at his client standing beside a house she didn't own, claiming it as hers, was enough. He dropped her cold, blacklisted her from every listing in the county. The rumors spread faster than wildfire. At the gym, at the grocery store, at the very yoga class she bragged about endlessly. She tried to steal her father-in-law's house, they whispered. Forged papers, got caught. The community that once bought her smiles now only traded in smirks. Lucas came by a week later, quiet as a man carrying someone else's shame. She won't stop crying, he admitted, staring at the floor. She doesn't leave the bedroom, no one calls her back, even her friends cut her off. I sipped my coffee steady. That's what happens when the mask slips. He didn't argue, he just nodded hollow. For the first time in months, my phone didn't light up with Jenna's demands. No sudden visits, no sharp comments over dinner, no pressure to sign papers I'd never touched. Silence. And that silence was heavier than any shouting she could have done. Inner thought. I didn't need to watch her scream or beg or unravel. Her own choices did the work. The world saw her for who she really was, and it turned its back. Helen called me the following Friday. She's finished. The state board pulled her credentials. Even if she tries to move, the record follows her. She won't work in finance again. I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. More like the closing of a door I'd been holding open too long. Good, I said quietly. Toby came over that weekend. Lucas brought him without her. The boy ran up the steps carrying his backpack, grinning. Grandpa, I drew us again. He unfolded the paper. This time I was inside the house, sitting at the table. Toby was beside me. His parents stood nearby, Lucas smiling faintly. Jenna nothing but a faint outline in the background, like she'd been erased. Do you like it? He asked. I swallowed hard. I love it, buddy. And I did. That night the house was still. I sat with Ellen's photo, staring at the smile she'd left behind for me to keep. Justice doesn't always roar, I whispered to her frame. Sometimes it just removes the noise. Final beat. Jenna didn't call. She didn't fight. She simply vanished from our lives, swallowed by the weight of her own schemes. And that, strangely enough, was enough for me. Some victories aren't loud. They're a chair pulled out, a place reclaimed, and the quiet that finally feels like home. It was spring again when I set the table, just 4 places this time. No neighbors, no veterans, no Helen with her briefcase, just family, real family. The roast was smaller, the wine cheaper, but the room carried a warmth I hadn't felt in years. The house smelled like it used to. Garlic in the oven, polish on the wood, and faint laughter drifting in before the meal even began. The doorbell rang. Lucas stood there holding a pie, sheepish but smiling. Brought dessert, store-bought, but it's something. Behind him, Toby ran in, clutching a rolled-up poster. Grandpa, I did a project at school. You gotta see it. At the table, Toby spread the poster flat. Crayon drawings, shaky letters. At the top, in red, Family Heroes. There was a stick figure in a chair at the head of a table. White hair, glasses, a big smile. That's you, Toby said proudly. I told my class how you take care of me, how you tell the truth. My teacher said not all heroes wear capes. The words hit me like a hammer and a blessing at once. Lucas cleared his throat, voice rough. He worked on that all week, wouldn't let anyone else help. I touched Toby's hand lightly. Best project I've ever seen. Dinner moved slower than the old days. No Jenna snapping at every slip, no tension humming beneath every word. Just clinking silverware, easy conversation, Lucas laughing softly at Toby's jokes. When the plates were empty, Lucas rose without being asked. I'll do the dishes. I blinked, then chuckled. That's a first. He glanced back, half grinning, making up for lost time. The sound of running water filled the kitchen. It wasn't dramatic, but it was something. Maybe the start of something new. Toby leaned close, whispering like he was telling me a secret. Mom doesn't like talking about you, Grandpa, but I don't care. You're my hero anyway. I pulled him into a side hug, my throat tightening. Don't you ever forget, Toby. Heroes aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who don't back down when it matters. He nodded solemnly, like he understood more than his years should have allowed. When Lucas came back, drying his hands on a towel, he hesitated by the chair at the head of the table, the very chair Jenna once made me feel unworthy of. Dad, he said quietly, that's your seat, always was. What? I sat down slowly, not out of pride but out of restoration. The weight of the chair felt different now, heavier and lighter all at once. Not ego, just balance returning. Lucas sat across from me, meeting my eyes for the first time in months without shame. I know I don't deserve it yet, but thank you for letting me try again. I nodded steady, trying the only way forward. The evening stretched gently. No shouting. No forged papers waiting in drawers. No fear that my home could be stolen in silence. Just Toby's laughter echoing off the walls Ellen once painted, and Luca's clearing plates like a son who finally understood. When they left, Toby hugged me tight at the door. See you next weekend, Grandpa. I watched them go, the house quiet again. But this time the silence wasn't hollow, it was peaceful. I poured one last glass of scotch and sat back in the chair at the head of the table. Final beat. The same seat they once tried to deny me now feels earned. My voice is steady, my home is mine, and the silence. For the first time in years, it feels like peace.